Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the academic procession which is about to enter the hall, and please remain standing for the national anthem. You are encouraged to join in the singing. The text is printed on page 11 of your program. Please rise for the academic procession.
Australians, oh let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth of toil, our home is scourged by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gift of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strength, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this special celebration. An important day in the lives of so many of our graduates, but also in those days for you who've supported them through all the years they've been studying with the University of Adelaide. My name's Diane Davidson. I'm the Deputy Chancellor of the University of Adelaide, and it's my pleasure to declare open this congregation convened for the purposes of conferring degrees. I do wish to acknowledge the Kaurna people, the original custodians of the Adelaide Plains, and the land on which the University of Adelaide's campuses at North Terrace, Waite, Roseworthy and Theberton are built. Today, as many people have said in the preceding week at other ceremonies to our graduates, is the first day of the rest of your lives, but it's also a day which ends a segment of your life. And I hope that when it's over, you'll be able to reflect upon both what an achievement you've made here with your studies, but also the friends, the networks, the experiences, the adventures, the things you've never told anybody about, all those things that have happened here at university which have shaped you. We're very proud that you chose to study here, and we're very proud that you have achieved this day. So it is now my pleasure to call on the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Professor Jenny Shaw, to present up a special candidate for an honorary degree. Professor Shaw.
Deputy Chancellor, it gives me great pleasure to present to you Dr. Anne Summers. The award of the degree of Doctor of Arts, honoris causa, acknowledges Dr. Summers' standing as an internationally known author, award-winning journalist, editor and publisher, and founding member of the women's liberation movement. Anne Summers grew up in Adelaide and was educated at Cabra Convent. Leaving school at 17, she initially worked in a bank in Melbourne, then as a bookshop assistant until she returned to Adelaide, enrolling in 1965 in a Bachelor of Arts degree in Politics and History at the University of Adelaide. While at the University of Adelaide, she became a member of the Labor Club, later becoming aligned with the radical student movement. In 1969, she became one of the founders of the women's liberation movement in Australia. She was involved in the early 1970s in helping to start Australia's first women's and children's domestic violence refuge. Anne Summers' PhD, which looked at the history of women in Australia, became an acclaimed best-selling book, Damned Whores and God's Police, which has remained in print since it first appeared in 1975. In 1975, she began work as a journalist on the National Times, and in 1979 she was appointed Canberra Bureau Chief for the Australian Financial Review and then the paper's North American editor. In 1987 in New York, she became editor-in-chief of landmark feminist magazine Ms, and the following year, with business partner Sandra Yates, Dr. Summers bought Ms and Sassy magazines in the second only women-led management buyout in US corporate history. She was also correspondent for the Far Eastern Economic Review and Le Monde, and later editor of the Good Weekend magazine. Anne joined the board of Greenpeace Australia in 1999 and was chair of the board of Greenpeace International from 2000 to 2006 and deputy president of Sydney's Powerhouse Museum from 1999 to 2008. She was formerly Australia's first Assistant Secretary of the Office of the Status of Women from 1983 to 86, when Bob Hawke was Prime Minister, and was an advisor to Prime Minister Paul Keating before the 1993 federal election. Her books include her autobiography, Ducks on the Pond, as well as The End of Equality and The Lost Mother, A Story of Art and Love. She also published Gamble for Power, an account of the 1983 federal elections, and, with Margaret Bettison, her story, Australian Women in Print, 1788 to 1975. Her recent books include On Luck and The Misogyny Factor. She currently writes opinion columns for the Sydney Morning Herald and the Sunday Age, and since 2012 has run her own digital publication, Anne Summers Reports, which covers a range of topics in politics, social issues and the arts. In 1976, Dr. Summers was awarded the Walkley Award for Best Newspaper Feature Story for her investigation into New South Wales prisons. In 1989, she was made an Officer of the Order of Australia for her services to journalism and to women's affairs. Acknowledged as a leader of her generation and as an Australian legend, Dr. Summers has continued to educate, challenge, entertain and inspire those who have followed her. I am very pleased and proud to present to you, Deputy Chancellor, Dr. Anne Summers, Bachelor of Arts, Doctor of Philosophy, Doctor of the University, Flinders University, Honorary Doctor of Letters, University of New South Wales, Officer of the Order of Australia, for admission to the honorary degree of Doctor of Arts, honoris causa.
Well, distinguished guests, graduates and their families and friends, it's certainly a very great pleasure for me to be here and to be finally accepting a degree in this wonderful Bonython Hall at the University of Adelaide, my old alma mater. The last time I had the opportunity to do so was in 1970 when I graduated with an arts degree from this university, but I did not attend the graduation ceremony. Back then it was fashionable to boycott one's graduation. It was a political protest. I can't remember now whether it was a protest against the war, that would be the Vietnam War, or whether it was a more general protest against the entire capitalist system, with no doubt some women's liberation thrown in. We didn't use the term feminism so much back then. Whatever the reason, I did not turn up to accept my degree, nor did most of my friends. We got our degrees in the mail. So it's good to finally be here, to have the opportunity in person to be accepting the honour of this degree. And I thank the university very much for choosing me and for not holding against me my earlier act of protest. It is probably difficult for students today to have any idea of the kind of political atmosphere that existed on university campuses in the late 1960s. It was a time of political dissidence worldwide, but especially in the West. There was loud and persistent opposition to the war in Vietnam, to American imperialism, as we like to call it then, and especially to what was known as the military-industrial complex that was said to run the US and its wars. Most of the protests came from students and other young people. 1968 was a year of massive protests. Students tore up the streets of Paris. There were riots in many cities. Many major cities and universities around the world became political battlefields. University administration offices were occupied by students who were angry to discover that their universities, supposedly places of learning, were often being funded to do research for the war effort. Here in Adelaide, we were not certain that the university was engaged in war research, but we felt we had enough other complaints to justify occupying the Vice-Chancellor's office anyway. So late one afternoon, a small group of us, probably no more than 10 or 12, walked through the front door of the Mitchell building, as it's now known, through the administration building and straight into the Vice-Chancellor's office. Surprisingly, we met no resistance. In fact, we met no one. The offices were empty of people, and so we were able to simply stroll in and inspect the place. One of our leaders ensconced himself behind the VC's desk. We'd seen footage from other campuses, Sydney for instance, and Columbia University in New York, of students being forcibly evicted by police. Often tear gas was used. We met with no such opposition. After half an hour or so, we grew bored. How were we going to stir up student sympathy for us and our cause if there was no police brutality? In fact, there were no police. So one of our number rang them. "I'm the Vice-Chancellor at Adelaide Uni," he said. "Some students have taken over my office. I'd like you to come and arrest them." "The Vice-Chancellor told us you might call," the police said. "He has no problem with you being in his office." The Vice-Chancellor at the time was Geoffrey Badger, later Sir Geoffrey Badger, back in the day when we still had knights and dames. Oh, wait. Geoff Badger was a very smart man, and he certainly had our measure. Unlike other universities, where Vice-Chancellors totally overreacted and turned resistance into mayhem, Badger knew that if he ignored us, we would have no option but to go away. He was right. Totally deflated, we left. The revolution was averted. That was then. Your issues are different today, and your ways of demonstrating are probably less confrontational, which does not make them any less heartfelt. What I would like to say to you today is that the lessons that we get from having spent some years at a great place like the University of Adelaide are often not apparent until we leave. You might have acquired some specific skills or training, or you might have opted for a more generalised field of study. Either way, you have engaged your brain in ways that will serve you for the rest of your life. You have learnt to think. I hope that you have also learnt to challenge received wisdom, to test conventional thinking, so that you are able to ensure that the rules that govern us conform with contemporary values. For most of us, our lives are not disrupted by war. Unlike the boys I went to university with, the young men here today do not have to face conscription into military service. But you will have other challenges. They are more likely to be economic, scientific and technological, as well as figuring out how better to manage ourselves politically. All of these call for people who can tackle problems, people who can think, people like you. There are boundless opportunities today for people like you. Don't be afraid to be bold and to take risks, perhaps jump into new areas, take advantage of being young to learn as much as you possibly can. When I was a kid, people would say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Not that there were many options for a girl growing up in Adelaide when I did, especially if you didn't want to be a teacher or a nurse. That's why we had to start the Women's Liberation Movement, which began in Adelaide on this very campus with 6 of us meeting in a room over the refectory. But we no longer ask people what they're going to do when they grow up, not once they're about past the age of about 5 years. Not because we don't grow up, but because our lives are likely to be fluid and challengeable and exciting as work and projects become available that none of us could have imagined even a few years ago. You might have careers, but you are unlikely to have the same job for life. You are probably going to switch occupations, certainly employers, possibly countries, as you make your way through life. All you really need is your head, your heart, and your imagination. 7 years ago, we did not have the iPhone. That tiny device has revolutionised our lives. It has put street directories and encyclopedias and countless other enterprises out of business. But it has created untold and previously unimaginable new possibilities for communication, for entertainment, even totally new activities such as the ubiquitous selfie, for enterprise, and even for activities such as philanthropy and charitable giving. The world that you are graduating into is an unbelievably exciting place with possibilities that are so rich. I envy you starting out and wish you happy and fulfilled lives. And I thank you for forgiving my youthful recalcitrance and having me back to receive this honorary degree.
On behalf of the graduates and their families attending today's ceremony, I would like to thank Dr. Anne Summers for her stimulating and inspiring address. We are honoured that you have taken the time to join us on this special day to share with us your thoughts and experiences. Your words of encouragement and advice are greatly appreciated. They remind us that education places upon each of us an enduring responsibility to make the best possible use of our talents and to contribute to the betterment of society in whatever way we can. Please join me once again in thanking Dr. Anne Summers.
I will now receive the candidates for degrees. A call on the Vice-Chancellor.
Deputy Chancellor, I, Professor Warren Bebbington, Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of Adelaide, certify to you and the whole University that the graduates who will be presented to you have fulfilled all the conditions prescribed for admission to the awards for which they are so presented.
I, Diane Davidson, Deputy Chancellor of the University of Adelaide, by virtue of the power committed to me by the University, confirm that each graduate is admitted to the rank and privileges of a holder of the award in the University of Adelaide for which they are so presented.
Deputy Chancellor, I, Professor Jenny Shaw, present to you graduates from the Faculty of Arts. To the degree of Bachelor of Teaching, Panayota Vicky Alexopoulos, and Panayota also receives the Bachelor of Science. Letitia Stephanie Andrusiak, and Letitia also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Georgia Appleby, and Georgia also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Samantha Lucy Ashmore, and Samantha also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Brittany Erin Booth, and Brittany also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Stephanie Bourdignon, and Stephanie also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Domenica Olivia Caruso, and Domenica also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Emmett Cashel, and Emmett also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Chan Lisha, and Lisha also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Chen Irene, and Irene also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Lana Di Stefano, and Lana also receives the Bachelor of Science. Stephanie Ann Fraser, and Stephanie also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Madeline Jade Freeman, and Madeline also receives the Bachelor of Arts. David Mark Gamble, and David also receives the Bachelor of Science. Tegan Michelle Gilson, and Tegan also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Natalie Grace Gordon, and Natalie also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Kubin Ha, and Kubin Ha also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Maureen Ann Hauser, and Maureen also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Naomi Kate Henschke, and Naomi also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Claire Louise Hocking. Tamara Jamal Alwa, and Tamara also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Louise Ann Jessup, and Louise also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Xiao Zhongkang, and Xiao Zhongkang also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Kathy Kontos, and Kathy also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Elijah Christopher Kopsaftis, and Elijah also receives the Bachelor of Science. Luke Raymond Learson, and Luke also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Liu Wanzhen, and Wanzhen also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Shana J. Loder, and Shana also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Julian Magliaro, and Julian also receives the Bachelor of Science. Matthew Allen Mason, and Matthew also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Hayden Ryan McDonald, and Hayden also receives the Bachelor of Science. Thomas Samuel McDonough, and Thomas also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Timothea Shem Moylan, and Timothea also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Georgia Louise Paps, and Georgia also receives the Bachelor of Mathematical and Computer Sciences. Angelo Christian Pica, and Angelo also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Adele Ann Rashi, and Adele also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Joshua Francis Richards, and Joshua also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Asha Tian Rode, and Asha also receives the Bachelor of Arts. David Vincent Salomone Violi, and David also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Jessica Ann Scholar, and Jessica also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Damon Mark Sexton, and Damon also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Amy Tegan Shattock, and Amy also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Laura Kristen Sklaptis, and Laura also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Alexander Jordan Smith, and Alexander also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Ashley Page Stevenson, and Ashley also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Lana Lidhui Sun, and Lana also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Sun Xiaoling, and Xiaoling also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Akira Thomas Sunk, and Akira also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Eleni Takianos, and Eleni also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Peter Mark Terminello, and Peter also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Shinta Teusner, and Shinta also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Michaela Imogen Till, and Michaela also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Kimberly Erin Truman, and Kimberly also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Joel Kevin Turnbull, and Joel also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Paul Joshua Turner. Henry White, and Henry also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Sha Meishi, and Meishi also receives the Bachelor of Mathematical and Computer Sciences. And Jacqueline Lucy Zaccardo, and Jacqueline also receives the Bachelor of Arts. To the degree of Bachelor of Media, Janina Hippolito, and Janina also receives the Bachelor of Arts. To the degree of Bachelor of International Studies, Stephen Roger Bond, and Stephen also receives the Bachelor of Arts. James Robert Grist, and James also receives the Bachelor of Arts and the Diploma in Languages. Emma Marie Hamilton, and Emma also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Isabel Grace Martin, and Isabel also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Lara Wilhelmina Miles, and Lara also receives the Bachelor of Arts. Lachlan Joseph Neville, and Lachlan also receives the Bachelor of Arts. To the degree of Bachelor of Arts, Samantha Jane Aegis. Charmaine Isles Alvia. Kendra Hugh Wong Ang. Tristan James Astley Turner. Erika Amy Bagwana. Imogen Elise Bassador. Alexandra Ellen Blandis. Josephine Maud Bolt. Catherine Ann Brunner. Vanessa Se Wing Choi. Sharana Christensen. Amy Helen Church. James Martin Kobiak. Georgia Sarah Davies. Demi Heather Della Porta. And Demi also receives a Diploma in Languages. Emma Louise Docking. Greg Julian Dujinski. Cassandra Mary Edwards. Edwin Lei Yongchang. Nicholas Kevin Egan. Samson Aluma Erasto. Alice Jane Evans. Chanthini Fry. Joseph Stewart Gray. Paul Grillo. Kathleen Mavis Hamilton. And Kathleen also receives the Bachelor of Science. Ellen Jane Hayden. Jessica Ann Holt. Amelia Joy Hull. Sherry Lee Tyler Hudson. Sylvie Gabriella Hugan. Elise Talia Jansons. Sky Brooke Jenner. Jacqueline Lee Johns. Jessica Kankula. Nathan Paul Koski. Luke Keith Kimber. Holly Louise Koning. Dimitra Kliozos. Madeline Ella Kretschmer. Daniela Rihanna Lemoire, and Danielle also receives a Diploma in Languages. Amanda Lee. Leong Xiao. Kieran James Lidner. J. Louise Litherland Delara. James Kenneth Loader. Emma Louise Lush. Kate Maitland. Julia Makyu Ting. Charlotte Grace March. Hannah Elizabeth Martin. Hunter Christopher Martin. Stephanie Jo Martin. Eleanor Laura McCall. Jamie McDowell. Caitlin McKernan Clark. Rebecca Louise McNamara. Erin Louise Mello. Matilda Louise Mentz. David Charles Milazzo. Lucy Anita Moffat. Kirsty Ann Moray. Bridget Mary Moriarty. Bonnie Eloise Nankerville. Harrison George Nicholas. Amanda Jane Paget. Peter Dionysus Panagaris. Sarah Valerie Penrose. Elizabeth Heather Potts. Emily Rose Renner. Jonathan Stephen Renwick. Sansia Chloe Renwick. Sky Amelia Riggs. Amy Jade Forrest Roberts. Madison Cree Roberts. Holly Louise Rogers. Sarah Jean Roller Wojciechowski Barrett. Izat bin Roslan. Hugo Caden Shaw. Elliot Mark Smith. Siobhan Smith. Judith Ann Spencer. Catherine Anastasia Story. Sophie Strickland. Stephen James Hayes Schuster, and Stephen also receives the Bachelor of Laws. Crystal Tung Shilin, and Crystal also receives the Bachelor of Economics. Thomas Callan Murphy. Sujay Toman. John Gaetano Tretala. Anthony Trimboli. Laura Grace Trobiani, and Laura also receives the Bachelor of Science and the Diploma in Languages. Michael John Warrender, and Michael also receives the Diploma in Languages. Georgina Emmanuel Watson. Mathilde Charlotte Weiss, and Mathilde also receives the Bachelor of Laws with Honours and the Diploma in Languages. Nicola Jennifer Wolford. Aaron Victor Wooston. Honey Joy Sanos. And Kathy Cho Eatin. To the degree of Bachelor of Arts Advanced, Miriam Rose Crosby. Michael Lazaru. And Emily Francine Palmer. To the honours degree of Bachelor of Arts, Kian Maggie Anton. Philippa Rose Battersby. Robert Peter Farquharson. Ellen Lucy Ferguson. Jonathan Robert Fox. Hoang Hun, Jacqueline Lindsay Harris, Robin Ann Hill, Laura Hodgson, Catherine Patricia Cloquet, Caitlin Meg Langford, Pinky Lutt, Julia Law, Matthew William Lindner, Thomas Francis Moran, Lauren Elizabeth Morris, Samuel Thomas Nichols, Carmela Rosalie Pascal, Stephanie Diana Rogers, Charlene Casey Shear, Catherine Lucy Schinkel, Dominic Alexander Symes, Michelle Mary Toft, Mordecai Kelly Waite, Shane Gareth Walter, Blair Elizabeth Williams, and Sebastian Paul Rangels. To the Graduate Certificate in Online Learning Higher Education, Femke Theresia Adriana Buisman-Pellmann. Tsun Ting Kun, Lindley Carol Easton, Gillian Gowdy. To the Graduate Diploma in Education, Bryce Alexander Allen, Pamela Faye Angel, Sam Capurso, Stephen John Clayton, Kate Louise Delaporte, Isaac Joseph Ellis, Alice Rebecca Pfister, Paula Aileen Golding Ahup, Anna Karem Gull, Anne Elizabeth Harper, Dasina Hassin, Thomas Edmund Helps, Caitlin Elizabeth Horan, Jessica Claire Lemon, Alyssa Renee Lumsden, Prudence Louise Mangos, Charmaine? Nicole Lee Menta, Charmaine Deborah Mills, Vinesh Mistry, Raman Mittal, Rubaya Noor, Olivia Emma McCall Notkus. Giuseppina Palombo. Luigi Pia. Zlata Radovan. Caitlin Claire Randall. Jared Craig Russell. Tala Sabri. Martin Johannes Schurmans. Shannon Ray Siemens. Liam Matthew Sloan. Atsuko Smith. Jacqueline Michelle Stepien-Hulleman. Maylin Thomas. And Emma Christine Thompson. To the degree of Master of Education, Edmund Kyung Yong Hwang. Sarah Rafaela La Roca. Rosanna Lee Soy Ling. Patricia Ho Si Mei. Tian Xian Xian. And Chao Fung. To the degree of Doctor of Philosophy for a thesis entitled Teacher Assessment Literacy and Student Outcomes in the Province of Tawi-Tawi, Philippines, William Hailaya. Deputy Chancellor, this now concludes the presentation of graduates.
It is such a privilege to stand here and meet all of you people as you come across, albeit very briefly, but you all have expectations. Most of you have great excitement on your faces somewhere. You come from so many different backgrounds and experiences. It is our privilege to know you and to be pleased that you've studied here for so many years. Congratulations to you all. And as you move on into the wider world, you will reflect upon your years here, I hope. You now join well over 150,000 graduates from the University of Adelaide, people who have passed through here in the last 140 years. And those people are now spread in well over 80 countries. So we do keep track of people. You won't escape us, and we hope that you'll want to stay in touch with us. You are, of course, now our official ambassadors, and we will welcome you back here whenever you come. Whether you stay here to do research or to continue working, you know that you will always be welcome in this University of Adelaide community. And I'd particularly like to thank the supporters today. That I mentioned it earlier, but it is important that you know how much you mean to these people. You've supported them in all sorts of ways with a range of resources and a great deal of time and possibly a great deal of frustration, but they're here today and it's wonderful. So I would like to thank you especially. I'd also like to thank our mace bearer today and to congratulate her again. And particularly I would like to mention my own thanks to Dr. Anne Summers. I was a student at the university at very much the same time, and I do remember the incidents, Dr. Summers. Brought back quite a few memories there. But we have been fortunate to have a lovely celebration, and I hope for all of you graduates that you take that certificate away and hang it on the wall. Do not put it in the bottom drawer, okay? So now, could I ask all of you to stand, the graduates to be seated, please, while we congratulate you as a group. Well done again. Now, could I ask the graduates to stand as well so that I can declare this congregation closed and ask you to remain standing for the academic procession. Thank you.